Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Crysler. Each episode, we talk to business leaders and subject matter experts to learn about the challenges they've overcome and the challenges they still face. You'll hear fresh insights, real talk, and get inspiration to grow your business. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Sharon Custer, founder of Inventory Optimization Pro. Sharon spent years in inventory strategy and planning inside of a Fortune 100 manufacturer before starting her own practice. She helps manufacturing teams figure out why their inventory can reconcile in the system and still be wrong on the floor. And more importantly, what to do about that. So Sharon, thanks so much for coming on the Everyday Business Problems Podcast.
My pleasure, Dave. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, excited to get into this. We've known each other for, it's probably been a couple of years, I guess, now at this point that we've known each other. But yeah, excited to get into the conversation with you.
Yeah, it's quite a while, more than, 5 years maybe?
Has it been that long? Man,
I think
time
so.
really flies.
Yeah.
Time flies. Well, we're long overdue to get into this conversation. So I'm curious, kind of starting out in such a large company, what was kind of some of the trigger about what ultimately led you to leaving that and thinking about starting your own thing specific around inventory and helping companies get a better understanding of what's happening with their inventory and what they can ultimately do to streamline those operations?
I think it's interesting. It doesn't really matter is big or small company. From big corporation, and every single day, I was in the marketing team. So what we do is every day we're thinking about what's new application, how to develop new clients, go to new market. And we have a set of industrial products. The principle of the product is the same, but the application is different. So the whole main goal is go find new clients, go develop a new application based on the product physical and chemical characteristics. So it's exciting. It's always something new. And it's always something like breakthrough. It's basically chasing the numbers. So we don't really, in that environment, we don't really think about a lot of cash flow. We only know P&L, we know, balance sheet. As a marketer, my background is in, marketing, and we definitely learn accounting, all that, finance, all the metrics, KPIs is all in the package that you sit in that position. You must know all those things. But it comes to a point, the managing director came to me and said, hey, we don't have enough space in the warehouse. And of course I know. And the problem is yes, we do have warehouse managers. We have a whole team of the shipping, international, import, export. We're constantly talking about it. We constantly want to clean out the dead inventory, slow moving inventory. We do ABC analysis. It's all granted every day. That's what we do. But the thing is to the point that when you really sit there, understand hey, if you don't have the space in the warehouse, you're not going to do anything new. There's just nowhere to fit. So that's just a wake up call. You start getting creative. What do you do with all those assets inventory, right? And at the time, we're always proud of ourselves. Yes, we hit 20% sales growth. Our inventory count is 100%. The company is big on those things, but it does not help the situation when you stuck in one little, not say little, it's a big section of the business operation, you just can't do anything.
Yeah.
So that's a learning process, like learning like, hey, you need to understand the whole scope of how to operate a business. And then when I start my own business, I really quickly learned that cash flow is the thing.
Yeah. There's nothing like going out on your own to understand how important and impactful cash flow is.
It is funny as hell. Like, you know, it's like, how do I put it? It's like when you are studying, like say medical, you say you cut, you bleed. Okay, that's a visual you learn, but it's really on you. That's also different level of the pain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I with that self-funded business, I really feel the pain and getting really creative, understand like, okay, what else can I help the cash flow really? Because like we import, we're wholesalers. So when you import, there's just so much space in the container that you can really count profit on. Like there's just very hard. There's no other way around it. So you get really creative with the supplier, with the buyer, with everything that you possibly can think of. And you have to be very careful with the timing. Okay, that's just another story. And then come to the floor. Okay, we're waiting in the warehouse again. And then, you know, in the past, there is somebody take care of it. So you don't really think about those things. Then you say, my operation is not that big. It will be all right. But you start have like, I literally sit there, watch packer to pack. I just to the point is like, where is the stuff? And then we are selling stuff to like across Central America, all the way up to Honduras, down to Brazil. And the funny part is like the client in Nicaragua called, Sharon, what is this stuff? Then you open it up and like it's just wrong. So the thing is like when you are, it's really minor, but they care. To me, it's minor because it's just the color difference, right? But it is really not minor when it is matching with something else. Like it's totally different meaning to the client. So I asked the packer what's going on, and then he said, like, I don't have a red, so I give him orange. So all those things I say, you can't do that if the packing list says red is red. Anyhow, so there's many different variation of the problems in the warehouse if you don't really do cycle count.
Yep.
And then another thing is like difficult part of the cycle count is like, we develop a lot of technique. We have resin, we sell epoxy, we sell fiberglass, all those things like with liquid or with fiber. You can't just cut whichever, you have 10 rolls. You cannot just open 10 rolls and just cut whatever meters you want. All that. It is what I'm saying. This is like maybe you feel like it's just here, a little bit here and there. But what I'm trying to gather with you all is that you have to have a centralized process to make sure that at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, you can count your inventory easily. Like for example, like I say, the fiberglass. If every row is like about 114 meters, and if you cut 10 meters here on row A, and then 10 meters there on row B, and then in the end of the month, it's like there's 10 meters left in one row, 5 meters on the other row. And the one customer say, I want 15 meters. And then you thought, yeah, I have 15 meters on the screen. I say, sure, go cut it. But you can't cut that fiberglass with 10 meters here and then another half of 5 meters there, right?
Yeah.
You don't do that. things like that. So it is how you manage your floor to reduce that possibility of the correct inventory count, but incorrect way of dealing with things. That makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, ultimately, folks that are tuning into this, obviously, everybody has a core understanding of, inventory and inventory principles. But I think just that last part illustrated a lot of the stuff that, that I'll see, which again is, what do we have and where, right? Becomes very critical depending on the type of business that you're operating. Both from a customer perspective, right? Customer facing, right? What are we actually going to deliver, and do we have the ability to deliver? And then back to your earlier point, just in terms of how it impacts the financials of the organization. And I think that's a missing piece I see in, for a lot of folks. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I kind of said the same thing, leaving what I call the confines of corporate and, even having P&L responsibility, but not necessarily being full on accountable for cash flow. I mean, we had, some metrics that tied back to it, but, seeing the real impact of cash, I think, as you start to go down the leadership level, right, it becomes really a critical, kind of puzzle piece to understand how those decisions that are being made at the lowest level, right, bin location, how those ultimately roll up and influence and impact, things like cash. So I think it's a great way to kind of position it. I'm curious, like, when you go into an organization, that is first bringing you in, what are some of the things that you kind of typically see from the perspective, like what are some of the assumptions, maybe, I guess, that you see with these folks? Like, is it just that, inventory is simple and, not that finite in terms of, details? I'm just curious to get your perspective on some of the maybe recent clients that you've worked with and some of what you've ultimately seen with them.
I would say most case when they come to me, they will have some kind of issue, but they don't know what. Like, they will have like demand. They say my demand forecast is not accurate, and I always say, like, demand forecast is give you direction. It's never will be accurate. Like the 100% demand forecast accurate, it just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But the issue comes is like when they do demand forecast and they have stock, overstock, understock, stock out. They just keep like yo-yoing like that. Or they would have cash issues, like they don't understand, like they already try to, tighten their demand forecast, try to be accurate so it sells right, so the cash is spent right. So
Yeah.
they think that's the focus they should focus on. But most of the cases I see is like the thinking process is very siloed. They think finance is finance, accounting is accounting, right? Bookkeeping is bookkeeping, and if the floor, whoever received the inventory is one thing, who is doing the production is another, and they all purchase, but they all look at the problems that they have the same system, say ERP. They think they are looking at the same numbers, but they are thinking different things.
Yeah.
They are not aligned. That's the problem. So that it's not saying like, okay, there probably the process could be more improvement. But what I'm trying to say is like when you are dealing with the inventory count for example, every month, and then you always have discrepancies. The floor counted, gave you the number, and then somebody punched in the system, say this is the real count today. But have you ever really think maybe there is a section of your receiving part, like you put your data later. Maybe there is some part is like you have the inventory comes in, it landed, but your invoice for shipping, all that is calculated later and you just didn't ever put it into it. So all those workflow issue, data flow issue, and then the warehouse workflow issue and the inventory movement issues, those are all together. And you don't even know which part you do wrong, so your number is wrong. And when the number is wrong, your finance, your KPI will be wrong. Your decision making is going to be wrong. And you can't just always say that the floor is counting it, so that must be right. It doesn't solve the root cause. You have to start looking which part of the process is wrong.
Yeah. I'm only laughing because we both know how, physical counts go and how things go missing and things become very found the next month. It's like, oh yeah, that rack. Oh yeah, forgot that one.
right. So that's just a funny thing. I had a client, like they sell very simple things, like they sell like a souvenir, like mugs or t-shirts and things like that. And then they have like a pink large, and then like it's the same item, but they name it 3 different ways.
Oh. Versus using other attributes, you're saying, right?
Correct. So their SKU naming is not structured, never structured.
Got it.
And then on top of that, all those things are scattered in different corners of the warehouse. So there's only one person now, which, rose pink equals to pink large, equals to, So what happened is that not only they always have a stock out when that item, they only count as the pink large as the main item on the website, always stock out, but they have tons in the warehouse, literally tons. And then when they run the financial report, they not only have a stock out all the time, and they always have an overstock with something else. So this is not healthy for not just reporting, it is not healthy for the business.
Yeah. I guarantee it's unhealthy for culture because somebody is getting reamed for these stock outages. But to your point earlier, right? And it was kind of why I love the way you've unpacked some of this, right? It's like oftentimes, and I don't care what aspect of the business we're talking about, but oftentimes we are solving for those symptoms and we don't have the kind of, bandwidth, right? Like mental bandwidth to just slow down and unpack what the real root cause is and start to attack that. And, you see it like you've already articulated that in a couple of different ways. I think it's great because it is day to day, right? Like that's the stuff that happens. But if you want to have these material impacts on the business, right? Ultimately, hitting the financials, this is the stuff that has to happen, right? You have to hit timeout. You have to understand that if you don't have, unique item numbers and, attributes associated to those item numbers, it's going to be very challenging for you to not just manage, right? But to ultimately grow. And then you're going to negatively impact your business in ways that you can't even quite connect the dots, right? What kind of churn does that company have, right? In the warehouse, guaranteed they're working through, both floor people on the floor, pick, pack, pull, package and ship, and right leadership folks, because somebody comes in, they try to get a handle on it. They run up against a wall like, oh, problem's too big for us to solve the root cause. So, here's all the workarounds. You got to go to this Excel file. Then you have to go over here to execute that process. And, slowly but surely, you're just, eroding margin, right? Like it doesn't take much. So, really great way to articulate some of what you've seen, because I think there's lots of different examples. And I think a lot of people might not look at inventory as one of those really core, pieces of their business. And really, that's all it is, right? All of, a business is inventory. It really is,
It really is. It has been like, it's very, very funny. Like, I talked to not just a few CFO, and they do have inventory-based business owners as their client. So I reach out and say, hey, do you guys ever have, gross margin issues, or do you have cash flow issues? It's kind of like I want to start a conversation. Sure. And the interesting part is that, we don't have inventory issues. And then, our gross margin or contribution margin, whichever you look at, it's fine. And I said, do you think your cost of goods sold is accurate? Yeah. And so then that would tell me a lot. Like they don't really think that your inventory is actually dragging your business down. Not when you're not aware of it, definitely there are some issues there. Yeah.
One of the things that as we were prepping for the show, you had mentioned, I think is just a really great articulation of this, but you talk about inventory adjustments, in terms of like, they're not just corrections, right? They're I think you used the phrase deferred explanations. And like, I believe I know what you mean with that, but I'd love to just kind of dive in a little bit deeper and kind of have you unpack that concept for us, because I think it will help to start to, build this picture of what we're really talking about and kind of connect those dots across the org, right? Like as we get up into C-suite for the work that's being done on the ground floor.
It would be deferred. The explanation is more so it's like it's already happened, right? So you just trying to backpedal and thinking like what possibly happened. But there are a few things from, I don't know if you want me to describe what from the financial side or from the floor. But
I think maybe if you connect those two sides, because I think ultimately folks, like that's the gap for most, right? They're either on the finance side or they're on the ops side, and very infrequently are they speaking the same language, right? So I think your ability to speak to that and help to close some of that gap from both perspectives would be really meaningful, because to your point, right? This is yesterday's news. So we're not moving the needle at all, right? Like this is just reporting the news that there's a problem. So how do we shift that conversation and start to dive deep, to understand the financial impact and also the operations impact?
Okay. So interestingly, the business owner would always have a question in their head thinking, okay, I'm about to place this order. So should I say yes or should I say no? Right. And it's really hard to foresee like if this is going to make money or if this is going to impact my cash flow. So they always have to base on what they can see, like from the historical point of view. Okay, I'll give you a very simple example. For example, demand forecast. Regardless what ERP, regardless your inventory management system you use, if you're thinking your concept or your logic is not right, the whole process is not right. For example, if you are using sales as like how many units you ship out, like say last 3 months, for example, and then you're predicting the next 3 months. And then you're thinking, okay, you have all those units you ship out as your true demand because that's what you sold. Logical. But in a way that you're not thinking, okay, is this real demand? For example, if today, during that 3 months, one of the week has severe stock out, in back of your mind, you remember that happened. But when you are doing demand forecast, you're not thinking about that. And then you just go ahead and then just thinking that's the real demand. But you ship this amount, say 50, but your real demand is 120. You're short. And then the next month you ship out more because the back order. So your demand is, you're looking at your historical data, but those are events that impact the true market demand. So when you are doing that, even you average out every like 3 months or 2 months, however you do moving average, it still have that impact, and you're not considering like, hey, it's because you didn't have the quantity to ship. That's why your demand was low.
Yeah.
And then when you do the purchase and you still thinking buying less because the demand back then was low, right? And the same thing as a promotion, you think the promotion was high, so that you don't know how much is really the promotion was impacting you. So you order more thinking without promotion, your demand is still that much. And on top of that, you are still thinking like, oh, that's how much I ship out. But have you ever think how much you being returned? Right? And especially like a lot of people I see is like they just, because return is really not easy to manage. Yeah. So then just kind of disregard it. And then when it comes like the month later, they write it off. But that's not how, it's not how demand focus should look at. So what I'm trying to say is that when you're deferring, when you're making that decision, you should put a policy or guardrail or factors that you should look at before you really place that purchase order. Does that make sense? Yeah. Not just the finance part. Yeah. But on the floor, what you guys can help is that when you are accurate with your, receiving, you are accurate with your recording, or you are accurate with the location of your warehouse or the naming of your inventory, the SKU naming, all those behavior, like people don't like to do those things because they think it's redundant, this is extra, This is a lot of work. The thing is, like, there are so many AI technology nowadays. You can literally scan your phone with a photo, and then they will tell you exactly what it is, how many is in your warehouse. It's no longer the barcode. Yeah. So you can really visually see those things. There's a lot of things can help you. All those things really will reflect back into your finance. Like I said about, you have many different names of the same items, and you have a stock out, and then you have overstock somewhere else. All those things you think is just a name different, but it probably 10,000, 100,000 of the inventory sitting there that you can't fathom how much it's really like. You think about it, like you have to borrow another 100,000 just to make sure that 100,000 in the warehouse is rolling your business. So you're carrying, like when you exercise, you put a weight on your legs, right? You carry that thing in your business. I don't know if I said it right. It's basically like you carry your weight to move your business. On top of that, you have to borrow money to carry that weight. Do you really want to do that? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great explanation and example. I think one of the things you said in there that, is another note I put together as I was prepping for the show. But it's this idea, and you actually put it in your notes to me, but it's this idea around, like stock outs or even like overstock. Really, I think the same concept applies, but it's instead of it calling it what it is, right? Traditionally known, right? You're talking about it through the lens of certainty, right? And I think that's a really interesting perspective on this because, it's back to, look, there's variation in everything, right? But if we can understand what the variation is, what the contributing factors to that variation is, we can tighten up the window. So we're no longer talking about, these large, swings, right? We're starting to target, a kind of specified deviation within. And, so I think it's interesting, like in terms of all of the work at the lowest level that goes into building this certainty. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that as well for folks that are, these are existing businesses, so they've got a lot of ongoing problems. How do companies start to think about, solving for some of these root causes that we've talked about to increase the certainty, reduce variability with, the output, whether it's specific to the planning and forecasting processes or what have you? Because to me, same thing, right? That's all in the symptom space, right?
Yes.
But let's talk about what are some things that we can do to start walking ourselves out of those problems, that aren't going to be a business disruption, because I'd say that's, the leading contributor for status quo. We can't do that for fill in the blank. So what are some of the things that you see that you're talking to folks, that are navigating some of these challenges? How are you approaching this with some of the conversations that you're in?
It could be very overwhelming because you just feel it and you don't know what's wrong with it. I would say that if you start feeling your cash is tight, or you start feeling like inventory count is always wrong, you just constantly just keep adjusting it, then there's few things you can do to start finding where's the problem. Okay. First is the cycle count. Okay. You have to treat inventory as a cash. If you do your bank reconciliation every month, make sure the invoice matching with your bank statement, everything is aligned. It's exactly the same thing as inventory. Treat inventory as a cash. So when you cycle count, people will ask me, how often do you cycle count? I say, general rule of thumb, at least once a month. But you should count it as often as possible, because the more you count it, the window of mistake is easy to see. You can see where the problem is. Yeah. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing is
I want to pause there for just a second, because I think oftentimes, I'm curious to get your take on this. I think oftentimes when a recommendation like that kind of gets pushed forward, people can think oh, we don't have the time to do this cycle count, right? But it's a means to an end, right? If we're doing cycle counts in a shorter time span, that then, to your point, right, the history is shorter to understand what's the root cause, right? Yeah. So again, if we can get to that point, then we can get back and expand out when we're doing those cycle counts. So I think that's an important point for people to understand. It's look, this isn't just a set it and forget it, right? This is the means to an end. So, but go on. I didn't mean to interrupt, but no. I thought that was an important point for folks out there.
Yes, not at all. It's really important, and it's really something people don't want to do. But again, treat your inventory like cash. That cycle count is very important. Second thing is if you really don't know what's wrong with your inventory, or what's wrong with your cash, or what's wrong with your purchasing, what you can do is that you take a batch of your order. Okay, it could be a container, it could be a PO, just purchase order, whatever that is. Go take that thing as a journey. From the moment you place the order, all the way until it goes into the warehouse, all the way to sold it. You start tracking it and see how it was treated, and then where's the problem. Okay, you're just focusing on that. You will find your data, $5 become $10 because that was 10 years ago. And then you didn't remember that you had a big discount buying a bulk or whatever that is. You will start knowing like sometimes the supplier A or vendor A selling the same thing to you like vendor B, but the price is, a few dollars off. They are different, but in your system market the same amount of dollar as the cost. Or maybe one is from China, the other one from India, and definitely the landing costs are different, but you trade it all the same. All those things, like once you track something as from the beginning to the end, you will start finding like a lot of shortcuts is eating your profit. Okay. And don't just think about the dollar amount. You're thinking about something like you are doing something unnecessary. Okay. For example, you keep thinking, okay, this item is not making money. And you try everything possibly you can to raise that bottom line, saying that I want to make more money for this product line. But honestly, that was just a record was just wrong the whole time,
Yeah.
So what I was saying is like you will start from, each department goes through this journey with this order. You will start seeing a lot of issues. It's just doesn't need to be there. And then you start putting standard operating procedure for all those things. And then you reviewed it in a way, not like, it's like, like when you try to lose weight, you want to go to the gym, you want to eat healthy, and then you start writing it down, make sure that you're eating the right calorie, you make sure you're doing the right thing. It's the same thing. You start journaling all those behaviors until it's your second nature that you don't do those things again.
Yeah, I love it. Great way to articulate that. One of the things, and hard to believe we're already is starting to wind this down, but one of the things I wanted to ask you, since it's, all the rage these days, but where do you kind of land on, some of the AI stuff that is out there, not specific to a tool or, kind of workflow? Let's talk about it maybe a bit higher level, right? Where do you kind of weigh in on what are some of the things that are actually helpful that we can utilize the tools for? And what are some of the things that ultimately just make the mess faster?
I really think AI, at least from I always learning, is at least right now is my understanding is that AI can help us quite a bit, a lot, in the way that it helps us to get more organized fast. High level from financial side is that from you collecting data, consolidate, all the way to produce a report, doing charts, doing executive summaries, all the way to strategy forming. AI can do all that in a close loop circle. Like literally, it's cut a lot of hours. I cannot really say how many hours or what, but I'm just saying like it extremely shortened the decision-making timeline. That's the part of the finance and high level of business running part. For the operation part is that it can help you to, for example, give you some examples. It also shortened the time of get your clarity. For example, you want to compare 5 different vendors for the past 10 years pricing variations, or when is the due date of the contract, or what is the pricing right now, and then what's the benefit of each vendor's giving to you. Man, you sit there, compare all that, you're taking notes, and then right, and then you type a report.
Yeah.
And you think about that, and then now you just going to the LLM, go to the AI, give all those comparison prompt, and say like, I need those XYZ question answered. I need it in a table. I need it in whatever that is. and then give me a summary, which one should I go for and why. It's just probably 30 minutes. It's done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to remember some of the contracts this thick. It depends what you're doing. Right.
Yep.
And floor is the same thing. In the warehouse, it's like you can say today you scan and then you pack, and then the AI can tell you, it's like, hey, I noticed this item is, should be bin number 5, and you always pick in the bin number 3, which is like a 2 different area of the warehouse. Like you can have AI do all those alerts. So it's like really it's just your imagination. Like what can AI help you? Like you have a question, you just go to AI and say, hey, I need to know if my item is, picking the wrong place, or if my item Y is always wrong, like the count is not right. Like you just give them some information and then say, tell me what else do you need to know so I can get the actual answer. All those things, seriously, you message me, I'll brainstorm with you. It's like in the past, it's almost impossible to do. And now like AI can make a lot of things possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a tool I utilize daily for myself with clients. I think the challenge is like everything else, right? It's that kind of messy middle where we don't have full context, where maybe we're trying to solve for symptoms and we don't necessarily understand all of the impact. But you can't ignore the sheer power of the kind of digestion of information, and the quickness with which it can respond. Now, we can have arguments over, the quality of that response, but there's no doubt that there is, that gap is closing, number one, but that there is some benefit of looking at this. But my encouragement or, words of wisdom are always, let's make sure we understand fully what the problem is. And so we don't get ourselves into a scenario where ultimately we're just kind of automating more chaos, and creating situations that we still have to go back and clean up, even though we just got there faster.
I know. That another thing I want to talk about is like AI can help you so much in doing things so fast and help you to reduce the timeline of making the decision. But at the same time, the first step, the cornerstone is that your data has to be clean.
Yeah.
Right? If your information input is wrong, the output is going to be wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Sharon, this was awesome. For anybody that's out there who wants to be able to connect with you, where's the best place for them to find you at?
Oh, you can find me on LinkedIn very easily, just at Inventory Optimization Pro. And that's it.
Perfect. Yeah. And I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Sharon, thanks so much for coming on the Everyday Business Problems podcast.
My pleasure. It was really enjoyable conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Thank you so much for listening today. If we brought you any value, please rate, subscribe, and share our podcast. Also, be sure to connect with us on social media by searching @The Crysler Club. Until next week, I'm your host, Dave Crysler.